Hello and welcome to your Eddie training. In this training, I will be going over all of the settings for your printer in PrintHub. Once I'm finished with PrintHub, I will go over some of the manual. About halfway through the manual, I'm going to go into BarTender and walk you through how to use that software to print to your printer. After going through BarTender, I will go over the other half of the manual, and that will conclude our training. So to get started here, we're going to first go over this little blue settings button in the bottom left-hand corner. In this window, you can change the default currency and language. You can change the frequency that your printer is going to check for updates. The default interval for this is to check every 7 days for updates. If you'd like to increase or decrease this frequency of this update check, you can do that here. And then if you want to get all the latest and greatest, I would recommend having this check for beta updates box selected. Next, under the Printing Preferences tab, you can tell PrintHub to either close once all printing is complete, as well as have PrintHub launch minimized when you first go to print. That's pretty much everything that's going to be in that settings that you want to know about. So next, in the top right-hand corner here, you're going to get a percentage readout of how much ink is left in your cartridge. If you hover over this percentage readout, you will find the remaining time left on your cartridge before it expires. From here, I will now go over the printer's advanced settings. So to get to that advanced settings, you're going to click on this printer settings button at the top and then go into advanced settings here. In this advanced settings window, you're going to see the feed speed and reverse speed. So if you have a cookie that's relatively lightweight or has a particularly smooth bottom, it's possible to notice any slipping on your cookie or on your cookie on the platform. If you do notice any slipping, you're going to reduce the feed speed and the reverse speed from 100 down to 50. And then you're also going to enable this half speed printing. If you still notice slipping at 50, you're going to reduce it further from 50 down to 20. At 20, you're just not going to have any issues with that slipping. If you're not noticing any issues with slipping whatsoever, just go ahead and leave this at 100 and leave the half-speed printing unchecked. Next is this cookie centering scan. So with this checkbox enabled, your printer is going to scan the front edge and the back edge of your cookie and then find the center from there. So when it goes to print, your printer should print in the middle of your cookie. If for some reason it does not, you can deselect this centering scan and then use the horizontal offset and the vertical offset to make your adjustments. So the horizontal offset is going to move the image on your cookie left and right. The vertical offset is going to move the image on your cookie up and down. In other words, closer to or further from the printer. Any change that you do make to this offset, you're going to do from the frame of reference of that cookie loaded on the platform. If your cookie is centering perfectly, you can just go ahead and leave that centering scan enabled. Next is the pause printing after X amount of cookies. So with this checkbox enabled and set to 12, your printer is going to pause after every 12 cookies. So this only works if you send a job that's larger than 12, so 13 or more. So for example, if you sent a job of 12 and then immediately queue up another job of 12, the printer is not going to pause between those two jobs. The reason behind that is the printer assumes that you're going to print your first 12, the job is going to complete, and then you're going to take the cookies off of the carousel, and then you're going to reload that carousel with fresh cookies and then send your second job of 12. Whereas, for example, if you send a job of like 18, your printer is going to print 12 and then pause. That's going to give you time to take the cookies off of the carousel and then reload that carousel with fresh cookies and then hit the pause button on the printer to resume printing. It'll print out the next 6 in this case, and then your job will be complete. So for example, if you printed 48, it would print 12, pause, print 12, pause, print 12, and then just keep doing that until your 48 has been reached. So if you want to kind of like babysit your printer a little bit more, you can disable this feature, and then your printer is just going to continuously print. So doing that, you do run the risk of your printer printing over the top of an already printed cookie. So you just have to be, you kind of have to babysit your printer a little bit more so that as the printer puts the cookie back on the carousel, you have to take it off of the carousel and put a new cookie in its place, just so that it doesn't print over the top of an already printed cookie. Next is is loading your cookies manually. So to enable this feature, you're going to power the printer off. In one moment while I do that, you're going to power the printer off. You're going to disconnect the cable that connects the carousel to the back of the printer, and then you're going to power the printer back on. When you power the printer back on, you'll see up in the top right hand corner of PrintHub, it does say manual mode is enabled. And then, so one reason that you'd want to load your cookies manually is if your cookies are larger than 3.5 inches or if your cookies are not a circle, square, or rectangle. When you do load your cookies manually, I'd highly recommend clicking on this Scan Large Printer for multiple objects. With this option deselected, the printer is going to look for a print surface that's 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches, and your print item can be up to 3/4 of an inch thick. With this option selected, your printer is now going to look for a print surface of 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches, and now your print item can be up to 1 inch thick. All right, so and then the rest of the settings down here are just to control the lights on your printer, so we can go ahead and skip that for now. Next, I'll go into the queue. So every time you send a job to the printer, it's going to pop up here in the queue jobs. As that print completes, it's going to jump down to the past jobs box. In the past jobs box, you can get a print cost, prints per cartridge, and a prints remaining. The print cost is how much money in ink that your print is going to cost you. The prints per cartridge is an estimate of how many prints you can expect to get on a full cartridge, and the prints remaining is an estimate of how many prints are remaining on this cartridge. So this is all dependent on you keeping your image the same. So you're not making the image bigger or smaller, and you're not changing the image out with another image. It's also dependent on you keeping your print settings the same. So you're not changing the print quality, color matching, or saturation. If you change any of those things, the print cost, prints per cartridge, prints remaining are going to be accurate for your last print, but they will not be accurate for your next print. However, the next time that you do print, you will get updated information anyway. PrintHub does store the last 5 jobs. So after I print the next job, this one on the bottom will fall off, and then your newest job will be at the top. So now I'm going to talk about the manual. So section 1 is just setting up your printer. So this section here is just going to walk you through the steps on how to get your printer set up. Section 2 is going to go over your print item specs, replacing your cartridge, loading your print item using the carousel. So for these print item specs, when you're using this platter here, with the spacers, you can print items that are 2.5 to 3.85 inches. With the spacers removed, you can print larger items, so 3.5 to 4.375 inch items. One thing to keep in mind is when you are printing those larger items, with those spacers removed, if your item is 3.42 inches or larger, you will need to skip every other slot in that platter, and that's so that the cookies don't bump into each other when they're loaded on that platform. Next is if you're trying to do a smaller item, so 1 inch to 2.5 inch item, we do have these Macron adapters available for purchase on our website. So they are $200, and if you wanted a less expensive option, there is an option on Amazon. So you can just search for a silicone coaster and get these ones from Better Kitchen Products. So these are an 8-pack, so you would need to purchase 2 packs of these to fully saturate your carousel. The reason we're recommending these ones in particular is because on the flip side of these coasters are some concentric circles that you can use to center your print item to this coaster. The reason for that is this coaster is actually thick enough that the printer can actually detect this coaster. So when it does that scan from the front edge to the back edge, it's actually going to find the center of this coaster instead of the center of your print item. So you do want to have your print item centered on this coaster so that when your printer prints, it prints centered on your print item. So next, let me go back up to page, or actually, sorry. So next is loading your cookies manually. So when you load your cookies manually, and you have that option for Scan Large Printer for multiple objects selected, like I said earlier, you can now print on items that are 4.5 by 4.5 by 1 inch thick. And then when you do load your cookies manually, you want to have them centered left and right on this platform and overhang the back of that platform by about 1/2 inch. It's actually about 0.4 inches or 10 millimeters. So let me go back up to the table of contents. So next is section 3, and that's about PrintHub and everything I already went over. So next is printing. So section 4 is going to be setting up your BarTender template, adding text and graphics to your BarTender design. So let me go into BarTender now. So when you open up BarTender, you're going to start a new document. Start off with a blank template, and you want to make sure that your Eddie printer is selected. You want to specify custom settings. And here's your page size. So the page size is going to be your cookie size. So if your cookie size is one of these predefined sizes, you can go ahead and click on that predefined size and then hit next. Otherwise, if your size is not listed here, you can just click on user defined size and then type it in manually. So even if it is listed there, you can still type it in manually and it'll still work. Next, you do want to click on the 1 or more items per page with 1 row and 1 column. You do not want full page media. So when you have this one or more items per page, you can now select the shape of your template. You can zero out your margins and you can change your template size. And then it jumps to the background features. Whereas if you go back and select full page media, it just goes straight to the background features and you don't have those other options. So in this case, I will select one or more items per page with one row and one column. And then if you're doing a circle cookie, you can click on either circle or ellipse. I typically prefer ellipse because when I go to change the template size, when I click on ellipse, I can change that template size manually, whereas if I click on circle, I do not have that option. Then if you have a square or rectangle cookie, you can click on rectangle or rounded rectangle. Either one will work. Just one has rounded corners and one doesn't. So I'll hit next, and then you want to make sure that your margins are set to 0, and then you want your template size to match your page size. So if you take away anything away from this, you do want to make sure that your page size matches your cookie size. You want to make sure that your template size matches your page size. You want to make sure that your margins are 0. If somebody has an issue with their printer, typically it's with alignment. 9 times out of 10, that issue that they have is that they are including margins when they should not. So including margins is just a surefire way of ensuring that your cookies are not going to print aligned. So next, in the manual, it says to click on picture and then embed your image. However, my suggestion is when you get to this page, just hit finish. And the reason behind that is when you embed your image, you can no longer change the size or position of that image on your template. Whereas if you just place it on top, you can make the image bigger, you can make it smaller, you can move it around, you can distort it. You just have a lot more fine control over that image. So to import an image, you have 2 ways to do that. The first is to click on this picture button and then hit insert from file. This window will pop up, and then you can find the image that you want to use, click on it, hit select, and then click on the template to add it. The second way is just to open up your File Explorer, find the image that you would like to use, and then just drag and drop it. So in this case, I'm just going to use this cookie design. Then you'll notice that this image does not come in centered. So to center this image, you're just going to click on it and then use this button over here on the right-hand side that says center horizontally on template, and the one right below it says center vertically on template. And then if you wanted to resize this image, you can do that just by clicking on any of the corners and then clicking and dragging. And then you want to go ahead and recenter that. Another way to do that is just to right-click on your image and hit Properties, or you can just double-click on your image. Double-clicking on it is going to open up this box, and you're going to go into Size and then Stretch to Rectangle. So now with this lock aspect ratio selected, every time you change the width, the height will change proportionately, and vice versa. So for example, if I want to change the width, I'll type in 3.5, hit Tab on my keyboard, and then that will automatically adjust the height as well. Once you have everything sized and positioned exactly where you want it, you can now go ahead and add additional text. You can add another image, you can add shapes, you can add whatever you want to this design. So after your design is finished, we can go up and print. The first thing I'm going to recommend is going into Document Properties. So in here, you're going to get your color matching, print quality, color matching, and saturation. I would highly recommend always printing on quality 4. So qualities 1 through 3 do print faster than quality 4, but the improvement in quality that you get, at least in my opinion, outweighs a couple of seconds that you're going to save per print. And qualities 1 and 2 in particular are prone to getting some horizontal banding in your print. So this would be some horizontal lines that you see across the width of your print. So to get rid of that banding, you're just going to go to quality 4. Next is your color matching. So the purpose of the color matching is to match what you see on the screen to what actually gets printed out. So unfortunately, I can't tell you exactly which one of these profiles to use because it is dependent on the frosting that you use. So this is just a setting that you're going to have to come in here and play with to find the one that looks the best to you, and then use that one for all of your cookies going forward. So if you print on royal icing one time and then a marshmallow the next, these are 2 different mediums and they may require different color matching profiles. So again, that's just something to keep in mind. So next is your saturation. So the higher you go with your saturation, the more ink that you're going to use and the more vibrant your prints are going to be. However, the higher that you go with your saturation, the higher the chance that your ink is going to bleed on your frosting. So to combat that bleeding issue, you're just going to reduce your saturation. So what typically works well for most customers with most images is about 65% for that saturation. Again, similar to the color matching, the saturation is just something that you're going to have to play with to find what looks best to you with the least amount of bleeding issue. So in this will also depend on the image that you're using. So if you're using a very dark image, that's going to require a lower saturation. If you're using a very light pastel type image, you can get away with a little bit higher saturation. But like I said, 65 is usually a pretty good spot to start off with. Another thing to keep in mind is that you want to make sure that your frosting is as dry as possible. So what we typically recommend is that you bake your cookies and then frost them, and then let them sit out for about a day or about 24 hours to let that frosting dry out. At a very minimum, you want to get a crust over the top of that icing. And then after that day, you can go ahead and print on your cookie. And then if you're going to package your cookie, you're going to let the cookie sit for another day after printing to let the ink dry. There's three things we have found that will dramatically decrease that drying time. The first is to use a heat gun, so sitting about 10 to 12 inches away for about 10 to 15 seconds on the high setting. You're going to use that heat gun on that printed cookie to dry that ink, and then after that 10 to 15 seconds, you can actually go ahead and package your cookie immediately without any additional drying time. What also seems to be working is using a dehydrator and also just brushing on cornstarch on your printed cookie. So after you get all of those settings set exactly how you want them, we can hit OK, and that will essentially save your settings. And then if you hit print, and then since I have my image so large and hanging off of the template, I will be getting a warning. So that warning will pop up here. That's just saying that part of your image is hanging off of that template, and whatever's not on that template is not going to print. So long as everything that you want printed is on your template, you can ignore this message and just hit continue. Hitting continue will tell your printer to come alive and start printing. If you hit cancel, that will cancel that print job, and you can go in and make any changes that you want, and then go back and print like normal. So that is essentially how you do a circle cookie. So I will now go in and do a template on a custom shaped cookie. So for this, the template setup is going to be pretty much the same, except for instead of the 3.5 by 3.5, you're going to take the widest part of your cookie and the tallest part of your cookie, and that will be your width and height. So in this case, I'm going to do a plaque. So that's roughly 4 by 2. And then I'm going to still do the one or more items per page with one row and one column. And this time I'm going to do rectangle for the shape. And then here again, I want to make sure my margins are all 0. And then I want my template size to match my page size. Next, again, once I get to this background features, I'm just going to leave all three of these boxes unchecked and hit finish. So from here, I can again open up my File Explorer. And then in this case, I did take a picture of I took a picture of a cookie cutter from the website or from the internet. I'm going to use that picture, and I'm going to drag and drop it into BarTender. And then from here, I do want to make this image a little bit bigger so that it fits the entire rectangle. So again, I'm going to make this, double click on the image, and then change the width and height here. And just want to get it close to your design. And actually, it looks like with this cookie cutter that I found, the page size does not quite match up with the proportions. So to fix that page size after you have it already set up in BarTender, I'm just going to come up to this page setup and go into the page. And then in this case, I'm going to change it to 3. And then I'm also going to go into layout and change the template size to match the page size. And again, making sure that all of my margins are still 0. I do not want to automatically scale this. So I'm going to hit no, and I can recenter everything. And that's a little bit better for that aspect ratio. So from here, now that I have the cookie cutter on the BarTender template, I can add text, I can add graphics, I can add whatever I want to this design. So if I want my text to be exactly on this spot on the cookie, I can just move it to wherever I want it. And then if like I said, if I want to add another image, I can do that. So again, to add an image, I'm just dragging and dropping from my File Explorer. I'm just going to resize it. Again, after you have everything sized and positioned exactly where you want it to be on the cookie, you can, and actually one thing that we're running into here is that my text is behind this image here. So if I want to, I can just click on that text box and then hit right click and arrange, and then go into order and then bring to front. That'll bring that text box on top of that image. So then after everything that you have on here is exactly how you want it on the cookie, you can take that image of the cookie cutter and delete it. And then everything that you have already on there is going to remain and will print out exactly where you want it on your cookie. If you're doing a pattern and you just want to fill up the entire cookie with that pattern, you're just going to fill up this entire rectangle with that pattern, and no need to bring that cookie cutter image in. And in that case, since you are trying to fill up the entire cookie, I'm going to go back into the page setup, and I am going to make that page size a little bit bigger. That's just to ensure that the entire cookie is going to be covered. So I am going to increase the page size, so the template size and the page size, by about 1/4 inch. And again, like I said, that's just to ensure that the entire cookie is going to get covered by that entire print, and you're not going to have any white lines on the perimeter of your cookie. And then from here, you can just go ahead and print the same way that we did before. So now back in the manual, if you have a different program that you're more comfortable with using, such as Illustrator, Photoshop, CorelDRAW, Silhouette, Cricut, any of those, you can use any program that prints to a letter printer to print to this printer. One thing to keep in mind with that is that you do want to make sure that your page size and your template size matches your cookie size, and that your margins are all set to 0. Next is your printer driver settings. So that's going to go over all of your print quality, color matching, saturation, all of that. Next is section 5, which is printing from a Mac, and I will have another video showing how to do that. Section 6 is going to be your troubleshooting and maintenance. So this is going to break down your printer into its various parts and tell you the frequency that each part needs to be cleaned. One part I do like to specifically mention is the exterior and interior of your printer. So when you're cleaning the interior of your printer, you want to avoid cleaning this area marked off in red. The reason behind that is your printer has some grease in that area that allows the printhead to move smoothly and prevents excessive wear to the printer. And more importantly, you have a clear piece of plastic in this area called the encoder strip. That encoder strip runs the width of the printer and has some timing marks on it that tells the printer exactly where the printhead is at all times. So if you clean that too aggressively, you can actually rub those timing marks right off, and then your printer will need to come to us for repair to get that part replaced. So you can be without your printer for up to about 10 days after we receive it to get that part replaced. So if you get any crumbs or anything in this area, just use like an air duster to blow it out of there. So next is the filters. So this printer has 2 filters. It has the crumb catcher filter here in the back, as well as an ink trough filter kind of tucked up into the printer underneath this little ink trough. We do have a video on our website showing exactly where or exactly how to replace those filters. And that video can be found on our website, like I said, primera.com/Eddie downloads. Scroll towards the bottom of the page, and it says cleaning and replacing filters. Those filters will need to be cleaned monthly and then replaced every 6 months. And to clean them, you're just going to take them out of the printer, submerge them in water, kind of shake them around a little bit and to dislodge some of that ink, and then let them air dry and then put them back in the printer. So next is this little checklist. This is going to be kind of like a high-level view of all the parts of your printer and the frequency that each part needs to be cleaned. And for the filters, it just shows you how frequently they need to be replaced. So this is something that you can print off and just keep a log of what you clean and when. It's totally up to you if you want to use them or not. And then lastly is this manual feed mode. So to enable this mode, you're going to power the printer off. You're going to disconnect the cable from the back of the printer. Disconnect the cable that connects the carousel to the back of the printer, and then you're going to power the printer back on. Now with nothing loaded on your printer, you're going to send your print or multiple prints. When you send your print, the platform is going to stick out and present itself. When it presents itself, you're going to load your item following the instructions on page 26, where you have it centered left and right on the platform and overhanging the back of that platform by about 1/2 inch. Once the item is loaded, you can press the pause button on the printer. Pressing the pause button just tells the printer to take that item in, print on it, and then present it to you once the print is complete. Once it's presented to you, if you had sent multiple prints, you can take that item off, load your next item, press the pause button, and just repeat that process. And that is everything for this training. Thank you, and have a good day.